as we talk to successful entrepreneurs who have conquered immeasurable obstacles to live the life of their dreams. These are the Rockstar Entrepreneurs. Joe Mimran is a Canadian fashion designer and entrepreneur best known for launching the Club Monaco and Joe Fresh brands. From an early age, Joe was exposed to fashion design by his mother, Esther, who ran a small business outfitting Toronto socialites from her home studio. After launching a small factory with his brother Saul, Joe turned to the business of design and branding, which led him to create a hugely successful minimalistic brand, Club Monaco, in the mid-1980s. He ended up selling Club Monaco to Polo Ralph Lauren Corp in 1999 and continued to create massively successful brands such as Pink Tartan and Joe Fresh in the early 2000s. Recently, Joe Mimran has joined an elite group of investors on the TV show Dragon's Den Season 10. Welcome to this week's Rockstar Entrepreneur Series here at the beautiful Trump International Hotel in downtown Toronto. And joining us now is Rockstar Entrepreneur Joe Mimran. Thank you for being on the show today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Before we get into how you build multi-million-dollar retail companies like Joe Fresh and Club Monaco, let's talk about your humble beginnings. Your first job was delivering groceries from your father's grocery store. How do you think that experience shaped you into becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, I think every experience along the path is a shape to your personality and to what drives you. You know, I started very, very young to be working, 12 years old. But it was very formative because I worked for tips. I had a little bit of my own money at that age, and I really developed this desire to be successful.
Your mother, Esther Mimran, introduced you to design at a very early age. Talk to us about the impact she had not only on your personal life, but in your career in fashion.
My mom was a tireless worker. She had two jobs. She worked on the sewing machine at night. She worked in a garment factory during the day. The sewing machine was my background music. I also loved to have her make clothes for me. That's what really sort of fueled my love for fashion. The other soundtrack I had in my life at the time, because it was the 60s, were the Beatles and the Stones, and that was a big fashion moment. You know, it was the skinny suits and the Beatle boots and the haircuts and all of that, and that really was formative in terms of the aesthetic that I developed, and even to this day, that whole look of skinny suits and horn-rimmed glasses is still something that I love.
Yeah. Before you officially launched your fashion career, you worked in various fields. You worked in a knitting mill, you had your own art gallery, and you even worked as an accountant. When did you know for sure that fashion and design was something that you wanted to do and that it was your passion?
I always loved the arts, and I just couldn't see myself just going down an artistic path because it worried me financially.
Yeah.
So I went, got my Bachelor of Arts, and then I realized I really had to get also a business degree.
Yeah.
So I went and I got my BCom, my Bachelor of Commerce, and I also got my accounting degree, so I became a CA. And then the minute I graduated and got my CA, worked for Cooper's Lybrand for a couple of years, I realized at that point I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And the fashion world is an interesting world because it does give you the opportunity to create something that is both artistic and also economically viable. So there's this blending of business and art, commerce and art, and how you put those two together can be very powerful.
Speaking about that, let's talk about your success with Club Monaco. What was the inspiration behind the line?
Interestingly, I started with my mother and my brother. We opened up a factory, and from the factory we realized that branding was where success was going to be found. I had this idea of doing this line of unisex clothing, Club Monaco clothing, and we just tried to sell it wholesale. It didn't work. And that forced us into retail. And people always ask, so well, what failures have you had? Well, that was a failure that turned into success. And what is interesting about that is that we pushed ourselves to do retail at a time. We didn't really understand retail or know retail, but we knew that there was this kind of opening and opportunity, and we seized it. And from the day we opened it, it was a hit.
And of course I have to mention your success with Joe Fresh. How does it feel being the brains behind such a big Canadian staple?
So I started by doing some President's Choice home products on a consulting basis, and then they asked me whether or not I would be prepared to do an apparel line for them, and that was really an interesting challenge, because again the price points that were required to work across the country were very low. We brought amazing prices, we brought a color palette that was clean and fresh and delicious, and in a food store that's really important.
Yeah, I remember meeting you at CAFA and we talked about your success, and you mentioned it was all blood, sweat and tears. You know, was there ever a time in your career where it was just really hard for you and you wanted to give up? And if so, how did you get through that period? What pushed you through?
I've had it throughout my entire career. In the early days, I would spend 60 to 70% of my time looking for money to finance the business. Many mornings I didn't know how I was going to meet payroll that week. But you just persevere and you keep at it. And if you've got the belief, then hopefully it'll reward you.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned that you knew you were an entrepreneur. What do you think has set you apart from other fashion designers and people that, want to get into the fashion industry but never made it? What do you think that set you apart from that?
I think one of the things, and I tell people all the time, is I think they have to have a good grounding on the finance side. It's not enough to have passion. You've got to mix that passion with some good discipline, some understanding of the consumer, and you've got to understand how to process all of that into really making it a marketable product.
And what does success mean to you?
Success means many things to me. It's a great family, it's great kids, it's good health, it's being interested, it's getting up and having a purpose, it's feeling passionate.
And last but not least, if you could look into the camera, and inspire one person that maybe, is at the end of their road, they want to give up, maybe they lost their passion and they don't, what would you say to them?
Well, I would definitely say, first of all, don't give up. You've got to fight, you're there to fight another day, and you need to find the inner strength, find some way of looking forward and seeing a vision that is inspiring to you, and continue to go for it. It's really hard, you may not be able to figure it out, but the more you put those positive thoughts in your mind, the better chance there is of you succeeding. It really is about projecting. They say you have to have a great vision for a business. Well, as an individual who wants to be an entrepreneur, you also have to project, and you have to think about what is that vision and how am I going to achieve it.
The Rockstar Entrepreneur Series is in partnership with Trump Toronto.